everyone, and welcome to the Mixing Glass brought to you by Bardtenders. Now, you guys know that we like to bring some amazing guests onto the show, and shockingly enough, we have another one for you tonight. But before we get into that, I have to bring on my co host, Michael Windsor. Mike, how are you doing?
John, it's great to see you. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm excited. In 3 days, we're going to be in Kentucky. It's going to be fantastic. We have so many awesome things on the horizon, and God, this just feels good, doesn't it?
It feels great. I also found a friend in Lawrence who's going to let me crash with him, so I only have to drive like 45 minutes instead of 2.5 hours to get there at 8 a.m.
That's
So
incredible. You're going to get there at 8 a.m. You're
well,
off to the races?
I have to fly out at 8 a.m. So I need to get there at like 7. So
that's
not that early, but when you're typically 2.5 hours away, it's not fun.
Well, the cool thing is this is our first episode that'll come out after we've attended the conference. So shout out to everybody who was at the.
It was so great to see you. It was so much fun.
So great to see you.
You remember that time? You remember when that guy said that one thing?
Oh, the one thing about the other thing?
It was hilarious. Just good on you. Hilarious. That was classic.
Classic stuff that's said at bartending conferences. Who would have thought? Haven't seen you in a long time. No. Okay. Enough of that. That's ridiculous. Okay. I think it's time that we introduce our guest. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, please save me.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So we have for you Justin Koury. Justin has spent more than 25 years in the culinary, wine, whiskey, hospitality, and consulting world. He has an MBA with a focus in hospitality tourism, and his website, Wizard of Whiskey, has covered the wine and spirits industry with a podcast since 2012. Justin is completing his American whiskey book with over 1,000 whiskeys tasted blind and hundreds of interviews. He spends his time writing, cooking, and reading when he is not on the road visiting wineries or distilleries or working with clients. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to say that it was great seeing you both at the
Yeah, I know. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Who would have thought we would have ran into you? It's just it's such a small world.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Thank you both for having me on.
No, we're excited. It's going to be a fun one. As long as you don't roll a natural 20 like Chris did on our last episode, I think everything's going to be fine.
Anything's better than the squirrels, frankly. So.
Anything's better than squirrels, that's true. But Justin's going to find out about that here in a second. I know he has a 20-sided die over there, preloaded and ready to roll.
Ready to rock and roll.
If you want to give that bad boy a roll, what do you have?
All right. 14.
14. Okay. I think this is a really good question for you. If someone asked to be your apprentice and learn all that you know, what would you teach them?
I would start with the meaning of life and work my way down. Work my way down to a classic bechamel. That's a really good question. I've always been such a sharer of knowledge. I don't know if that's even a term, but I don't believe in hoarding knowledge. Once I learn something, I'm pleased to share it. So I think they would learn probably how not to do certain things, like how not to set up a booze room, which is also your studio, which is also where you try and create content. How not to do that. How not to attempt to write a book where everything is blind, and so you spend most of your life just putting stuff into mini bottles, and you don't know what it is. It's just a number to you, and then your wife is annoyed because she has to enter 50 more whiskeys into the key, which you don't have access to. So yeah, but
that's healthy.
Yeah. But realistically, I would say, I mean, just honestly, how to be in the hospitality industry, because it has changed so much since I started that I'm still learning things every day. And so the second I learn something, I would turn around and share it with them.
No, I love that. All right, I'm gonna get you a follow-up question here too. That's not as serious. If you had one thing that you were going to teach somebody that wasn't about professional advice, right? I call this everybody's McDonald's. What is the one thing that you're an expert on that you love, right? Whether it's a book, a movie, a game, anything like that. What is one other thing you're an expert on that you would actually teach them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been swinging the axe pretty well lately. I randomly decided I needed to take down some trees, and the tree service company doesn't come out this way, um, or as far the service I was going to use. So I have tools to do it electronically, battery powered things. Um, but I saw an axe the other day, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get some exercise while I cut down the trees. And I
Smart.
became very good at it very quickly. Uh, Another thing, my wife's just like, really? I'm like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Come on, that's pretty manly. I feel like she kind of appreciated it a little bit.
Yes and no. She's more aware, and I'm like, you have to stay inside with the dogs. Make sure that no one don't come out. I'll come in when I'm ready.
Wait, how intense is this axe swinging getting? The dogs
Yeah,
and
well,
the family.
I can't. I've got protective headgear on. I've got the headphones on to in case something happens. I've got protective eyewear. So I'm not aware of what's going on around me, and I don't want to swing it and then step on a dog, wind up hurt. So it's much better to just have. It's the same thing when I'm in the garage and I've got saws. Don't come in the garage when the saw is operating, because I can't
hear you.
Can't hear you. Can't focus on what's going on.
Just
don't.
It's an active work zone.
Yeah, it's an active work zone.
Do you have the yellow tape across that says "Do not cross this line" of power tools?
I should do that, but I text her and I say, "Hey, my headphones are in. If you need me, you have to call me. You can't don't just walk in the room." So it's for everyone's safety.
I just see you like shirtless, but with like a high vis vest on. That's what I'm picturing.
That is how my wife pictures it too. Actually, exactly how.
Mike, what about you? What's one thing you're going to teach everybody?
Yeah.
Wait. So the second question, not the first one.
Oh no, the first question. If someone asked to be your apprentice and learn all that you know, what would you teach them?
The first thing that I would teach them is how to find a better mentor, and then I would send them on their fucking way. All right, hey, John. What about you?
Oh man, probably something I was a master of that I don't want to do hospitality stuff, right? Because like I do that as like my job, so it's got to be something that's like outside. I think I would teach them how to properly like organize and like alphabetize things in their house and like make it so that way like the mise en place of your kitchen. Like, I think that like that's it at your house. Like I've got you dialed in.
But it'd be different for every house because, depending on the cupboards and the drawers, I mean, there's a lot of variables in that mix.
Oh yeah, have you seen like that Master Organizers show? Where,
no.
like they like go into people's houses and like organize everything?
I watch other shows at 3 a.m. John.
Sorry, jeez, Mike. This is a podcast for kids. Jeez.
It's one of my.
I didn't. Yes. That wasn't even a spit take. That was a choke take. I didn't mean anything like that. You perv. What's wrong with you? That's not what I meant at all.
Okay, sure.
God.
All right, how about something fun, Mike? What do you have that you're going to teach somebody that's, like just that extra thing? What's your McDonald's that you're going to teach somebody about?
Oh, God, man, I don't know. Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is Skyrim. I know that's really sad.
No, I love that.
I've lived a very uneventful life, but I can show you how to do some cool shit on Skyrim. Like not buggy stuff. I can show you how to level your character without a glitch infinitely. Okay,
it's a valuable skill, and apprentices exist in that world too. So like it's kind of great.
Fair enough.
All right, I love it. All right, before we get too far off the rails, I want to bring it back to our guest, Justin. We ask all of our guests on the show how you kind of got your foot in the door in the hospitality world. What was your your first draw to the industry? What was your first job? Like, what got you to getting on this career path?
Well, my origin story starts when I was a child. I wanted to be artistic, could not draw a straight line to save my life. Still can't. So I thought, okay, what can I do that I can be creative? I can play with food, because cool. So I, even as a child, I was like, let me be a chef. And so throughout high school, I worked in restaurants. Missed my proms working because those were big, restaurant days. And that's not a traumatic event. That's just something my wife asked. She's like, "You didn't go to your proms?" I'm like, "No."
It was rushed. What are you talking about?
Exactly. That's where I actually got overtime those days. So,
All the prom kids are in eating, and you're just back there.
exactly. I'm just back there just throwing it together. I was on the pizza station, and I was the spinach guy. So when they wanted us to have spinach, that was me. But anyway, so throughout high school, went through the culinary school, and then I'm like, wait a second, this is stupid. I don't want to have my own restaurant. I don't want to be a chef. Maybe I can find a way. And it was actually during a culinary class, during a class where one of the instructors was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this thing in Berlin or something." I'm like, "Tell me more about this." He was like, "Yeah, I consult." And I was like, "That's the thing. I want to do that." So
That's the one.
that's the one. That's the thing. He's like, "Yeah, I travel the world and I tell people what they're doing wrong." I'm like, how is this a fucking job? This is amazing. This was before consulting became the widespread thing that it is now. So I kind of followed that path, and I got into the beverage space while I was living in Virginia. Really wanted to learn more about wine. You're 18, 19, 20 years old. You don't know shit about wine. But people were always asking, "Well, hey, what would you pair? What would you do with this?" I'm like, I don't know. I'm just the cook. So
I'll tell you what though, that's a real thing, right? That happens in this world. As soon as like your friends or your family know that you work in a restaurant or like anything in the industry, you are now the go-to person
yes,
to make recommendations for the rest of your life.
100%.
No one tells you that, right?
They don't, and that's. I would like to change my answer about The Apprentice. That's the thing.
I know how to make Aunt Gail happy.
Exactly. So I started actually. I wanted to learn about wine. I went into the wine shop there in Newport News, Virginia, and I said, "Hey, can I get a job?" And they said, "No, get out of here. You know nothing." I kept going in about once or twice a week for a year until they finally said, "Fuck it, we have to hire you at this point." So they did.
It's either that or call the police at that point.
Honestly, yeah. They were like, "This guy's super stocky," whatever. But I wanted the job and I wanted to learn. So that first week, I think I started on Wednesday, and that first Saturday, I was pouring wines for customers, and I'm like, "This is a job. This is awesome." So that got me on my beverage journey. So I wanted to combine those two things, food and beverage, and I've been fairly successful in doing that at home. And just enjoying the hospitality journey. It never stops. You never stop learning. There's never not a new thing, whether it's Cheez-Its and champagne or cocktail creation with Slim Jims or whatever it is. There's always something new to learn, and that's what's so fascinating about it to me, and why it's honestly. I tell people who are outside the industry that the hospitality industry is the mob. Once you're in, you may switch jobs, but you never leave.
You never
You
leave.
may be a bartender for 10 years, and then you go to brand ambassador, or you go to some other position within that industry. But once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, it's true. And it's like you said, even if you leave and go into another industry, you become a banker or, anything, right? You're still going to be that person that recommends those wines and at dinners. You're still going to be the person that when you go out and someone asks you like, "Oh, what's good on the menu here? What would you try?" Right? You're going to be that person. So you're in it for life.
Yeah, you're going to be the person shaming the other people for not leaving an appropriate tip.
Oh, that's true. That's real. Or leaving the extra money on the table after everybody else leaves. Like, "Oh, I got a bathroom," and they slip money.
Sorry about them. Yeah, they don't know.
That's real. Okay, so you started your journey there. How did you get to kind of, launching? Well, what came first? Let me ask you this, because I know you have a company called BevFluence, and then you are also a Wizard of Whiskey. So which one kind of came first?
In this case, the wizard came first. Speaking of corporate gigs, when you leave the hospitality industry, it was my second day selling insurance in Chicago when I launched my podcast because I'm like, I got to get out of this corporate bullshit. And so I launched a podcast. I reached out to a distiller brand ambassador that I knew, and I said, "Hey, come on, talk to me on I think it was Skype at the time. And I
Yeah,
said, hey, come
Skype
back
would have
on
been
Skype.
big, right? That was probably like the only video call in the game there for a long
It was
time.
it.
Yeah,
It
I
was
talked
it.
to my grandmother on Skype. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. And so I was like, hey, send me some samples and we'll Skype and I'll record it. And so that's how the podcast originally got started. It wasn't called Wizard of Whiskey then. That came once I got back into the industry and started doing more retail work. I was GMing a retailer in Chicago. And we had this every Sunday. I call what was called Whiskey Church. People would come around 10 a.m. and we would taste through some whiskeys and talk whiskey. And someone said, "Hey, dude, you're like a wizard of whiskey or a whiskey wizard or whatever he said." And so I went online that night and I bought the domain.
Yeah, done.
The owner of the company loved it so much he went and made me order a wizard hat.
Okay, do you
There
have
is a
it?
picture. I don't have it anymore. It's been lost.
Oh, man.
Are there
Shame.
photos?
There is. I want to say there's probably one picture of me somewhere on the internet with the hat on. I had Musk scrape the rest, but I think there's at least one floating out there somewhere. But
that's good.
that I started Wizard of Whiskey, got really into bourbon, started the book, started reaching, made several trips down to Kentucky. It was supposed to be a bourbon, a love to bourbon book. And then everyone's like, hey, if you're writing this book on whiskey, why don't you take our rye and our other stuff too? And I was like, sure. And then 100 samples became 200 and 200 became 300. And now it's over 1,000. So, and these are all just American whiskeys. So it's a little out of control for sure. But
yeah, what year was this that this journey started?
Technically in 2008 was my
Wow.
first foray into the book. I started the book before. Let me go back. Actually, I started the whiskey book before the podcast, and so I really wanted to write. I'd done some technical writing for industry, again, industry focused industry journals, but nothing on the for the consumer side. And so started writing the book after a couple of trips down to Kentucky, and then right around 2013, 2012, I started the podcast, and then 2014, I really got into it after with the moniker Wizard of Whiskey and everything, and that's when things kind of really took off there.
You opened the door to so many follow-up questions. I'm going to try and not ask all of them because we'd be here for hours. But if you started it in 2008, you've been to a ton of distilleries at this point, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you've gone back and forth since then. So this is an interesting question that I've never asked on the show before. You were there in 2008 whenever whiskey is starting to boom in Kentucky, right? Mm-hmm. How has the bourbon trail changed since 2008 leading up to kind of where we are today in 2024? And how have you kind of watched that happen?
It has changed dramatically. You used to be able to call the heads of the Kentucky Distillers Association and they would answer your call. And now there's multi-million-dollar, developments happening because they realize that bourbon, just like other agritourism, things around the country, blueberries in Michigan, pumpkins everywhere, because that's what people do.
Spice latte.
Yeah. And so the industry has understood that agritourism pull and said, let's turn Kentucky into a playground for bourbon. And they've done it very well. They've done it I think as best as they could, as well as it could be done, with the experiences that they're offering. Heaven Hill and their huge, their huge space.
Michter's they're building again and expanding again, which is crazy.
Which they need to. I was one of the first to get a chance to tour the new Wild Turkey facility, and I almost wrecked my car. Not because I was one of the first.
I was going to say, where is the question, Mike?
Pump the brakes. Hold on.
That's what I didn't do, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what he didn't do, Mike.
No, a turkey ran in front of the road. That's what happened, yeah.
I was rushing. Weird story. I was at Maker's Mark. Bill Samuels, his retirement party was the weekend I happened to be down there. And I somehow got harangued into helping him hand bottles hand him bottles so that he could sign them. And so I'm sitting at a table with him doing, like
His
the
standing
artwork.
bottles
Okay.
to him.
Yeah. And so I was late to get to Wild Turkey. And so I'm rushing thinking, oh, it's not too far. But then I forgot Kentucky, a lot of these roads are 1 and 2 lanes. And so I'm rushing. And when I pull into Wild Turkey, their new facility, I went off this little mini cliff. It was like 3 feet off the ground, but my front tires.
It's called the curb, Justin.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. It was just dirt. That was the problem. And so, but it was muddy. And so that's why it took a little longer for me to actually extricate myself from that. And some tourists were very, very helpful, and helping me get my car out of the predicament that I was in. But these enormous experiences that they're building, and I was at a craft distillery the other day and seeing them talk about, oh, we go through this amount of grain in I think it was like 60,000 pounds in 6 weeks, and I'm thinking to myself, Jack Daniels will go through that in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So what they're doing in Kentucky, and honestly in Tennessee as well, and in very large whiskey communities like Texas and other areas, they're investing in the infrastructure as they should. So hopefully that answers your question without too much of a long-winded.
No, that's perfect. I think, too, just like for the sake of curiosity for our listeners, what would it have been like, booking a tour in like 2008, right? Like if you wanted to go to a distillery, like how would you make contact? Like what was that process like back then?
For a really nice trip that I took a couple of colleagues with me because I'm like, let's just make this a guys weekend trip. You just call them and say, hey, I'm coming down. I'm not that I could throw my name around, but I would say, my name is Justin. I'm writing this book. Here are my credentials if you need them. And they would say, okay, fine. They would call, I'm so sorry, I forget his last name, but Kevin at the Kentucky Distillers Association, and confirm it. And then they would call me back and say, yes, we'll roll out the red carpet for you. We were late getting to the trip. Getting to our first distillery. It was Four Roses. Al Young comes out and he's ready to go, and we had to stop at Wendy's because we were so late. We didn't have time to stop, and I refused to let them stop. So I sent someone else to grab us food because we were starving. And it was great. They would roll out the red carpet for you, and they do that now, but it's a little different. Everything is highly staged, which again, in order to keep the tourism, in order to keep things on track, you have to have a system. But it was great. You got to hang out with the Al Youngs of the world. I actually wound up having dinner with him and his wife at the Bourbon's Bistro, which was part of my original journey to why I wanted to write the book. And just a great time at these distilleries. Buffalo Trace, we got a chance to taste Pappy. I had a chance to sit and have tea with Sally Van Winkle Campbell and talk about her book.
Very cool.
It's thinking back now of how well I was treated and how upset I am that I haven't finished the book yet. Really frustrates me. So thanks, guys, for ruining that for me.
That's why we talk about this. We put it out in the world.
I was going to say, too, I don't think you really answered his question, because he was asking, like, what would it be like in 2008 to go and get one of these tours? And we're talking about for, like, the pedestrians, all right? Not the people with credentials that could be checked,
And that's a good question, and you're right. I didn't answer it. I don't know.
I'm just messing with you.
Giving him a hard time, Mike.
Just bust your chops.
It's a good question, and I don't mind having my chops busted on that one. There wasn't a lot of tours in that. There were a few people, the diehards, who mostly were locals, and like, okay, this is bottle release day, or they're actually coming to help bottle, because that's what distilleries used to do.
They didn't have the automated bottling lines. You actually have to put calls out and be like, "Hey, we just need hands today."
Yeah. But in 2008, it would probably have been the same thing. If you were really into wanting to come, they would have probably rolled out the red carpet for you, because it wasn't an industry. Tourism wasn't an industry at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But you're talking about writing this book. We're going to keep talking about it, so we bring this book into fruition, like in its final stages. But you had thousands of blind samples, right? So, what is your process for blind tasting all of these whiskeys? And like, then I also kind of want to ask too about like, what is your grading system for grading all of these whiskeys, and like, what is that scale that maybe if you can give us a little sneak peek of what that looks like.
I could pull it up actually if you would let me share my screen, but so I don't do scores. It's really just more a review from an objective side. This is what it is. This is what I smelled. This is what I, liked or disliked. But I will say I rarely write something that I dislike. It's generally just, okay, it's a bourbon. Here's my criteria for bourbon. It should have some vanilla. It should have some of these components. If it doesn't, maybe it's a little flabby. Maybe it's a little lacking. If it does, it gets the check mark. Other than that, it's not a rating system of this is 20 points, this is 100 points. It's really more just this is what I gleaned off of this whiskey.
If you don't mind me jumping in, because I know some people that are listening to this know a lot about what you're talking about.
Yes.
There also might be some people listening that may still enjoy the spirits, but don't have the formal knowledge that you have. So what would be the basic criteria of what makes a bourbon?
Sure. Aside from, so I don't know the recipes because I don't know the producers. I don't know what I'm tasting.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of the times they're not going to give you the recipe. I mean, sometimes it's hidden under lock and key.
Yeah, or really even just the quantities. I mean, assuming the TTB paid attention to the recipe, I know that it's at least 51%, corn. So that knowledge is okay. Great. I'll sit down and I'll taste. Okay, I've got this spirit in front of me. It's a number. And honestly, I don't actually know whether it's bourbon, rye, single malt, or anything. I also have to kind of figure that out as I taste. And sometimes there's things that will mess you up a little bit. You're tasting a single malt and you just get a ton of vanilla and a ton of cedar. And you're thinking, wow, this is probably a bourbon. The biggest indicator for me on bourbon is the color, just because it's brand new charred oak. And so it has more distinct, specific flavor profile and color. So I sit down, I have my glasses, I try and taste in the same spot every time. One of the things that has stopped me from completing this is all the times that I've moved. Since starting the book, I think I'm at 13 different moves. And now finally in my forever home, never leaving. This isn't it, by the way. this is whatever the app. This is not my house.
Yeah, for our viewers or for our listeners who can't see his elaborate background with a beautiful piano.
Yeah, that's it. That's his flat. He's gonna have to have the grand piano moved to the forever home here very shortly
for his new bourbon room. But no, it's just a virtual background.
Piano is full of bourbon samples. So I sit down, I pour myself a sample, I write down the number. I started using more computer now. It's, type it into my laptop just so I don't have to write it and then turn around and type it.
Mm-hmm.
And I nose. I spend most of my time on the nose. That's where you're going to get the most information about the spirit. Okay, what am I getting? I'm getting cedar. I'm getting oak. I'm getting the things that I'm supposed to be getting from a whiskey. Okay, my mind will go to now. What else am I getting? What fruits am I getting? What other esters am I getting? Is it banana? Okay, cool. It's banana. Is it banana runts? Is it baked banana? And I know this all sounds a little pretentious, but it's important for me to be able to say that in the note. And then that way I know, okay, if it's baked banana, it's probably got a little age to it. Because those chemical compounds happen as a result of two things. Of the aging process and in the concentration that comes from the aging process.
So 100%.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask a follow-up question here. I don't want to interrupt too much, but are you going to take all these blind samples and then also be able to go and back check and see the labels and see how close you were to a lot of these flavors and have notes before and after?
I do double check. I'll ask to see the key when I'm done with the round of samples, and I'll be able to see that section. And then I can see, okay, I was pretty close. A lot of the bottles haven't made it, so it's just a 4-ounce sample. That's all that's left, including things like the Pappy Van Winkle collection that I was, that I have. It's not in the bottles anymore. I put those in larger bottles and then they're numbered, so I don't know which one they are. I don't know what they are. I just know that they're in large bottles.
Yeah, that makes it fun, right? That's part of the
Yeah.
process.
So, and I have no clue what any of this stuff is. I'm like, okay, cool. So, but yeah, I do like to kind of double check my work if and when I can afterwards. And it's fun. It does take a while. I try and get through as many samples as I can in a sitting before I get palate fatigued. But even that takes time. Some days it's 10, some days it's 20.
Yeah, it's really dependent on, did you have coffee this morning? All right. What'd you have for lunch? You have a spicy, burrito? All right. Well, I'm probably gonna have a couple samples today. Like and every human is different on the planet as to like before their palate kind of, peters out for the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's real. Okay, so you have teased us with a couple of like, your favorite rare bottles that you have. And, one of the things we talk about, in the world of whiskey is like chasing these unicorn bottles. One, I think this is great because you're the wizard of whiskey, and now we're talking about unicorn bottles, and we also play Dungeons and Dragons on this podcast. So like we
all
have
coming together.
It all comes around. But for you, because your career and has spanned multiple decades at this point too, and you're writing a book searching for some of these things. What has been your process for chasing some of these unicorn bottles?
Well, I take what I can get, if I'm being blunt. If a distillery, and I actually was emailed, I got an email in 2014, probably. I remember it so well. I asked for an extra bottle. I said, can I have a 20-year Pappy? I'm missing, and I emailed them what I'm missing from their catalog. And they're like, oh, we need to keep those for the Chuck Cowdreys and the Lou Brysons of the world. And I remember that email because I hadn't reached that level. And I don't think I have reached that level yet, but they literally told me, you're not at this level to, and I apologize, I didn't really mean to call out Pappy, but I don't think that person's there anymore, but that level of, okay, they'll send me what they send me. As far as chasing down the unicorns, I try not to buy bottles if I can avoid it for 3 reasons. Number one, I don't have the budget because I couldn't possibly buy everything that I need for the book. Number two, it's not fair to the dozens of distilleries and at this point hundreds of distilleries who have submitted product. And number three, and most importantly, it's to save my marriage.
Yeah.
If I come back with a bottle, it's because I had to support that business that day, and I explained that to my wife. Hey, I was there. This is what happened. I bought a bottle to support what they were doing, and that's it. But I don't have the wallet to go out and grab these unicorns.
No, it's crazy.
It's what I can get.
How has that chasing process changed with the advent of technology, right?
It's pretty nuts. On the retail side, I've had to deal with the unicorn bottles for about maybe 10 or so years. An interesting story in Chicago. I was robbed at where I was at the GM, and all of the cops who were on my unicorn list showed up after I called the police. So you've got you've got the patrol car showing up, and then you have 13 others showing up because they just happen to be, they heard about it. They're like, hey, we want to make sure.
Well,
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. The cops that were on your unicorn list.
Yes.
What
So in most retail situations, you get a bottle, maybe two, of some of these bottles, whether it's 23-year-old Pappy, whether it's now like some of the barrel craft stuff, maybe it's Smoke Wagon. None of these existed when I was at so it was generally Pappy. It was maybe a few others, maybe Michter's 20-year, and I think Rittenhouse had redone a 25-year one time in that span. But for the most part, there were only a few bottles who had that unicorn status. And so you have a list. That's how you have to do it. Now it's changed, to John's point, with technology. It's a randomizer on Google. You just type in all the names, you download the list, put it in the randomizer, and it picks the names. But I had a list behind, under the, under the counter of everyone who wanted whichever bottle, and that doesn't just mean whiskey. There was also brewer, um, you know, unicorns from Founders and some of the other breweries
Yeah,
in
some of those
Michigan
cool
and the
beers
area.
that
So,
exist
so
out there.
am I
Insider.
understanding? If I'm understanding this correctly, you're talking about police officers who are looking for a specific bottle.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
Okay. This is
protecting
how
their
you.
stores.
This is how you get shit done in the world. Okay.
100%. I always felt safe, even when I was getting robbed, because they're a really cool group. There was maybe eight or nine of them total on the list. You come in and like, hey, Justin, how you doing? Um, but building those relationships, and I think one of the biggest problems with the unicorn battle now is people going from place to place to place like locusts and just buying up everything that they can without developing a relationship with that retailer. And if you go on some of the Facebook groups, you can see people telling horror stories about this. I went into this place and I asked the guy if he had any Blantons behind the counter, and the guy told me to get the F out. It's like you're coming into someone's establishment, not buying anything, but just hoping that he happens to have the one thing you're looking for.
Mm.
In a regular retail setting, walking to Walgreens, hey, do you have this? And it's behind the glass. Fine, they'll get it for you. But it's a weird thing to have these unicorns, and they even call them unicorns.
Well, it sounds almost like a scalper situation.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Oh yeah, people will buy. I was at Whole Foods, and we happened to get our entire year allotment of Eagle Rare, which Eagle Rare shouldn't be allotted. It shouldn't be a big deal. It's a great everyday bourbon, I think. And someone who wasn't me wound up selling the person all six. I'd literally just gotten the case in like 10 minutes ago. Some enthusiast, we'll call them, follow the trucks because they know the release dates. So they'll drive and follow the trucks to where they're getting delivered. And they'll come in and they'll say, hey, we heard you just got, Eagle Rare. And I'm staring at it. I'm like, dude, I'm just going through the invoice right now. What do you even get? Just please leave me alone. So
yeah, no, it's crazy. I worked at, we had Akil, Bab on the show, Mike, and him and I worked at a bar called Whiskey House in Gainesville. And this would have been like 2014. So kind of like, again, like at that first time, like cocktail bars were coming out for the most part. And we had a whiskey bar. So people would follow the delivery trucks from the deliveries.
Like a fish tour, for God's sake.
Yep. And like,
except they actually have money.
Yeah, well, yes. And they would show up, they'd watch they'd park, they'd watch the delivery driver drop off the cases of whiskey for us, and then they would come and bang on the door hoping we would open it so they could come in and buy our Elmer T. Lee, or
what's the goal? They're obviously not just drinking this, right?
Some of them are hoarding them like dragons.
Yeah.
That's real. Some of them are selling them on the secondary market for
for some extra cash.
So absolutely.
To pay for the one they kept, and then they'll sell 3 or 4 others, to make a little bit of
fucking scalpers, yeah.
Yeah, and for every 5 or 6 that make the market more difficult for people, there is 1 or 2 that are buying them for themselves because they genuinely enjoy it or for family members, right? The good ones are out there, but not all the time. It's crazy.
So,
all right,
I hold on before you move on. I do want to ask, what is your unicorn bottle right now?
Mike, we were on the same wavelength tonight. That was the exact same question I was going to ask.
My wife and I did have an agreement. I was asked to judge a competition in London much earlier this year. And I said, okay, I'm going to set aside X because Heathrow just happens to have a great selection of things you can't get anywhere else.
They really do. And for people that don't travel international like airports at their duty frees have awesome bottles that you can't get outside of anywhere else. Like it's awesome.
That's a pretty good little insider tip, actually.
It's awesome.
You both are so much. You guys are so much more plugged in than I am, and no, I'm loving all this insider talk. It's great. I feel like I should be locked up for it, but go on.
Yeah. All right, Heathrow.
I use that excuse to buy 4 bottles. A Mortlock 14 with a Madeira finish, a Balvenie 17 with a Madeira finish because I love Madeira finishes, and 2 other Madeira finishes. So anything in Madeira, I'm a huge fan of. And in fact, if I thought about it, I would have put that as my background because we were in Madeira.
Huge Madeira cask finish fan.
Yeah, so that's probably my unicorn bottle is things that I really can't get here. I mean, yeah, you can go to Kentucky, you can shop around and find really cool bourbons, really cool single malts, really cool whiskeys. I started with Scotch even before I found my way to bourbon or rye, and so I don't know if it makes sense that still has a little bit of a place in my heart. But when I'm buying something, it's generally a Scotch or something that I know that I can't get elsewhere.
Yeah, and something that you're probably going to sip on too, right? Like it's not something that you're going to throw into a cocktail at a party and all of a sudden it's gone. It's something that you're going to sip, savor, share with friends.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that's cool. No, I totally get that because that's the same kind of mentality I have when I travel. Like I look for those bottles that I can't get in the United States, and like they're not that popular, for the people that live there. They don't care.
Yeah,
They're like, whatever. It's a dime a dozen. Because like I got a bottle of Teeling that was aged in the Stiggins Fancy rum, barrels. I was like, that's fun, and like everyone else that's in the U.S. loves Stiggins Fancy, so I'm gonna let them try this. It's about the experience.
See, there's a niche market here with the way that you guys are talking about this with people following delivery trucks. There's like a James Bond of whiskey to where you just travel to these exotic locations and bring them back to the States for all these suckers to buy them at, double the cost because they can't get it,
It's called muling and it's very popular.
It's very
Okay, fair enough.
That's on our spin-off podcast where we I would never listen to that. Okay. No,
I
okay.
would.
So
I'll do it.
eventually along the road here, you go from Wizard of Whiskey to starting a company called BevFluence, right? Tell us a little bit about BevFluence. Why did you start the company and how did it come to be?
Yeah.
That's Juniper, aptly named golden retriever of mine.
I was at a wine bloggers conference because I do spend, at the time, I was spending just as much time in spirits as I was in wine. And didn't really see myself as a blogger, but I applied anyway to go to this conference. And I won a scholarship to go, and it took care of my flight and my hotel. And I was going to be in the Finger Lakes. I was like, great, I know some distillers out there. I'm going to rent a car, and I'm going to go hit up some distilleries. And so I was at a distillery, Finger Lakes Distillery, and I said, hey, Brian, I'm going to be at this wine conference. Can you send me some bottles, and I'll put them in the hotel room, and I'll see if I can get some people to take some pictures. I didn't know anything about the conference. I just knew it was going to be other bloggers. He said, sure. So he sent me with some bottles, and we had maybe 20 people in the room at one time throughout 2 days. Just come hang out, taste some bottles. I met several people at that conference who I later collaborated with on some additional events. I think the third year at that conference, I rented my own conference room and said, I'm going to reach out to distillers that I know and say, hey, give me X amount of money so I can rent this room. I just needed my cost covered. It wasn't a big thing, a couple $100, and you send as much as you want. I found a glassware sponsor to send me some glassware, and we had a piñata full of mini bottles.
Were they the 99 flavors? The 99 bananas or the...
It was actually Heritage Distilling makes this advent calendar. And it's elk rider, gin and bourbon and whiskey and vodka and a bunch of other stuff. And so they sent me a couple of those cases, and I was like, great, it's going in the piñata. And with candy, too. There was candy in there, but there was mini bottles, and people loved it. And at that conference was when, around 2017, was when me and these collaborators were like, hey, let's figure this out on our own. This conference, it's great. It's fun. It's like summer camp every year. You come, you hang out for a few days. You get a chance to eat some good food, talk to some people, taste some great wine. But there's no other content. There's no beer. There's no cider. There's no spirits. It's just wine brands that can afford to be there.
Sure.
So we started our own symposium in 2018. We sold a whole ticket and decided symposiums weren't for us.
One whole ticket?
One whole ticket.
Was it your mom? No, just kidding.
It was not. It was not.
It was your wife. It was your wife.
I hadn't met my wife yet, but actually, I take that back. I had met my wife, but it was a very good friend of ours who had bought a ticket. And when we said, "Hey, this thing is canceled," he said, "Keep the money. It's fine." As an investment, I guess.
It's a good
and,
friend.
We decided instead, let's pivot to smaller groups of people. It was known as the BevFluence Symposium. We changed it to the BevFluence Experience. The next year, we wound up in Denver, touring some distilleries, touring some breweries, local wineries, had some great meals, some great experiences, brought some local people together, bartenders, sommeliers, wine media, and we had a great time. And then as we were planning the next year, which happened to be 2020, right around May, we were all Zoom calling each other all the time. And right around May, the decision was made. We had to pivot to virtual only. We had no idea how long it was going to last, how impactful COVID was going to be. So we pivoted to, which was the word of the year, to virtual. And so we did some book sessions. We did some interesting classes. We did a lot of virtual, just sessions, and a lot of interviews with people. Like, hey, tell us about what's going on in your side, in your section of the country. And so from there, we continued to grow, and we continued to learn more about what we wanted to bring to the industry instead of take away. And we started our speakeasies, which are new versions of the experience. Rather than just lock everyone in an Airbnb, which we still do, by the way. It's the Airbnb plus a little bit extra, where we go to a distillery if we can find someone to host us, and it's several days of seminars, classes, labs, where we have all the spirits, all the wine, all the ingredients, like Slim Jims, like cheese puffs, and just random junk food and sesame oil and all these other things that you wouldn't think to have as an ingredient. We have a great bartender lab director. Her name's Chandler. My partner, Todd.
We know Chandler very well, don't we, Mike?
Oh, wait, it's that Chandler?
It's Chandler.
Hey, Chandler, how you doing? And also, I have to say, the Slim Jim and the Cheez-Its, for people who are out of the know, are like, what are you said earlier about pairing champagne with Cheez-Its. People who don't know what you're talking about are caught off guard by that, because I know I was.
They're also missing out. It's incredible.
It's junk food and booze is an incredible thing, and I incorporate that.
I've been doing it for years, man. What are you talking about?
See, look at that. You're a savant.
Exactly.
You know what? You know what junk food goes good with Miller Lite? All of it.
All of it.
All of it. Perfect.
Everything on the planet. So Chandler's amazing. My partner Todd, the co-founder, he, on the technical side and just on the cracking the whip side to get me to actually get the work done, he's incredible. So we put together these labs and these speakeasies to bring people together, put them in a room, sommeliers, bartenders, hospitality, anyone who can come should learn. And we're not just teaching you what we want to teach you. We ask what's missing. And in Baltimore, they said, we'd love to do some batching things. We'd love to do some education on this or that. And we said, great, we'll work on that and we'll put that together for you.
Love that.
So
what's your connection to Baltimore? Because you mentioned Baltimore a couple times. I lived there for 3 years, and my buddies still live there, but I'm just curious what your connection to Baltimore is.
We were going to be there for another conference, and we thought, let's barnacle our event before this event. So we can do both. And the conference said no. And so we said, okay. So we reached out and said, we're going to do it anyway. And that just happened to be how it worked out. Right, cool. I did live in Virginia for a time. So I was in Baltimore often. My business partner, Todd, lives in the Virginia area. So Baltimore just seemed like a natural place. Everything got shipped to him. And then we brought up a bunch of cider for the bartender lab that we were doing another campaign called the Palm and Perry Showcase, and we have all this extra cider. Let's bring it up and let bartenders play with it.
Yeah, why not? So what's on the horizon for you next with BevFluence? What should people be looking out for or getting excited about?
Sure, we are heading to Chicago in February, doing another bartender lab and speakeasy. We're tacking it on to Chicago's Cider Week because there's another cider conference in that space at that time. So we're gonna be there a little after the conference to hang out and to provide the speakeasy.
Love that.
We're also pitching half a dozen other cities. We're aiming to only do 4 in 2025 because they take a long time to put together. They're not big conferences. We want 20, maybe 30 people at the most to come, because that's more relationship building time, more community building time, more face-to-face time with each other. Not with me. No one wants to talk to me, but with the community. And so we want those smaller groups so that people can really connect and really have fun.
No, I think that's important too. I mean, you think about average class sizes too, right? It's like 16 to 25 really, and that's kind of where you get some of that best information, is concentrating that into one, smaller area. So I love that they're smaller and they're not trying to just be macro, right? And just get as many things in there, get all the big brand names, focusing on the smaller stuff and getting people the information that they want. So
and we also want to focus and try to focus as much as we can on the area that we're in. So with Baltimore, it was held at a local Baltimore distillery, and a lot of local producers became involved. And it's surprising because some of the bartenders, I hadn't really experienced this.
Mm-hmm.
You can try, but you'll never know every spirit or every product that is even in your own local market.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Especially larger cities, you just can't. So bringing people together and to discover the stuff that's in their own backyard is great. We don't reach out to Campari. We don't reach out to Diageo, mainly because they won't take our calls.
It's not 2008 anymore, right?
Exactly.
But no, I really do love that, though, because so much about the hospitality industry is the community. And for you guys to be able to bring that, be a focus point, even if you're not from that area, but to be a focus point to bring that local community together, that's really, really cool.
Yeah,
that's what we aim to do, is really have those deep conversations. And sometimes the dinners are us just reliving our traumas from our early days in the kitchen or our early days behind the bar, where
War stories.
Yeah. I haven't been behind the bar or behind the hotel registration desk, but I've done everything else in this industry. And so it's just a group of ex-chefs who are now bartenders who are now in the industry in some form, sitting around at dinner, having a bunch of random stuff and just talking about shared experiences. And, you work for this person? It's such a small world.
Mm-hmm.
It is such the experiences are similar no matter who you are. And it's great to know that community exists.
Yeah.
And
to be the person that can inadvertently introduce that community to itself a little bit. I imagine it can be pretty rewarding.
It absolutely is. It's great to sit across from these people, but ultimately, you leave and two people now have met and they're like, hey, we're going to collaborate, and it's building that collaboration on top of another collaboration, and it's fantastic to see those things.
Just takes a little spark, yeah.
Well, this is the perfect segue to asking.
Everybody drink up, by the way.
Oh, yep, that's an all drink. There's a train in the background. Can you hear that? Thank you, Mike. We like to ask all of our guests this, and like I said, it's a perfect segue. What was your favorite shift you've ever worked? We're talking about war stories. We're talking about those shared bonds, right? What is the favorite shift you've ever worked?
Wow. It was Valentine's Day. I was at a little restaurant in Muncie, Indiana. It happened to be the restaurant
in Muncie, Indiana.
There's only one restaurant there.
I'm getting flashbacks to Parks and Rec right now. This is great. I love it.
That's right, Muncie. That's such a great joke.
It was the regional airport, which was, it's kind of like Teterboro, small planes. And so the executive chef had called in sick, or I don't remember why he wasn't there, but no one wanted to step up. And I was in my early 20s at the time. I'd gone through culinary school, and I'm like, fuck it. I get all these veterans are here, but someone has to run the kitchen for that day. I did it. I presented 2 specials to the owner of the restaurant. I worked with the kitchen staff. I tried to do the best I could. And 2 days after the chef came back, he fired me. but it was still an amazing shift.
Wait, well, why did he fire you?
I don't want to speculate or
I
call
do.
anyone out, but yeah,
Speculate away.
Mike.
I may have overstepped.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I understand that it's his kitchen. It is what it is, and I don't hold any animosity towards him even after all these years. But something had to get done, and it was a great shift. And I have other great shifts too, but that was the way things came together, and the way the kitchen staff was just like, "Fuck it, let's do it because we have to. Otherwise, things aren't going to get out." It was great. It wasn't really,
What were the dishes that you prepared? What were the ones? What did you pitch?
One was asparagus with puff pastry, and we knocked out a quick hollandaise as a side. The other was a chocolate mousse, but it was filled in a little cup. You take a balloon, you make a little chocolate cup, and then you pop the balloon, or pull it off the balloon. So we did a little chocolate mousse, and that wasn't me. That was honestly the pastry guy who was taking care of it. But I was like, hey, I saw this thing the other day about the balloon. Could you do that? He's like, absolutely. So,
and this is in Muncie, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could have just deep fried a burger, and they would have been thrilled.
That was the third thing, actually.
That's the secret menu.
How did you know? But
that's why he got fired.
You wrap it with bacon first, but you put a Snickers inside. So,
and it's served inside a big gulp.
Yeah.
No hate to Muncie. I live in Kansas, so I get it. It's all good.
It's funny. You think back about all the places you've lived and all of the impact that it's had on you. Because I can tell you right now, I don't believe I've had any impact on where I've lived, but it has had a great impact on me. So,
the reason we ask this too is we all have these common threads, right, that connect all of us, and it's adversity sometimes too, right? How do we get through that? You said it yourself. Hey, we have to do this. We have to execute. Someone has to do it. And I'm stepping up, and you did it with your teammates. And that's what it's about. Some of the best restaurants I've ever worked in, managers didn't even work that shift. It's just all the employees doing their job and crushing it, right? Because the managers are just there to deal with guests really at the end of the day and give us our schedules, right? With the best restaurants, the employees actually drive the bus. That's the secret.
When you can go a full shift without anyone actually above you talking to you, it's incredible.
It's kind of nice.
Honestly, it really is, because things are going so well and you're all in the collective zone. When you don't know what time it is, you don't know what's happening, you just see tickets, and then you see red, and then the shift is over. And then you're like, how did we do that? No one came up, no one complained, no one, it's over, and you're like, fuck, that was awesome. Let's do it again tomorrow. And it never happens again, but
Hashtag fire your managers. Also, I think the fact that the chef fired you is a sign that you did something really great that night.
Yep.
Appreciate that. But yeah, it's and in my defense, the managers and the owner did ask other people, hey, who wants to be in charge? And no one said anything. And they pulled two other people aside and said, hey, can you do this? And they both said no. I'm like, all right.
Take your fate in your own hands. That's it.
This should have been the origin story right here.
Yeah, this actually
this is the birth of a hero. Okay.
I'll cut this. Cut this. Put it.
There you go. Cut it in. Yeah, no.
Yeah, we'll absolutely do that. And then your first origin story will be your favorite shift. No, amazing. Justin, thank you so much for being on the show, sharing your journey, sharing with us, all the amazing things you have planned with BevFluence. I'm excited to see what you guys do next year. Your cider conference is going to be great in Chicago in February, so everyone be on the lookout for that for sure. But Justin, what shout outs do you have for us?
Well, I do have, please follow, BevFluence. Please follow Swig and Ramble, which is our other podcast. I have an amazing partner in Julia Men, world traveler, wine, whiskey expert. She's got all the certifications that I never bothered with. Amazing palate she has. Brilliant, just a brilliant person. So we have a lot of fun on Swig and Ramble. And yeah, we obviously, if you're listening to this, you're already following and listening to the Bardtenders. But if you're not, and you just happen to come across this, definitely follow those guys. They're pretty cool and not mean at all.
Just
That's definitely directed at you, John. I could see where his eyes were looking on the screen.
100%. Yeah.
Nah, it's cool. I'll see you guys.
John and Mike, thank you so much for having me on. I
Yeah,
truly
thanks for coming
appreciate
on.
it.
No, thank you
It's
for being on the
blessed.
show too. Mike, what shout outs do you have other than saying I'm mean?
We all know who is talking about. Okay, come on. Also,
fair.
we had such a great time at Elevate, so that was a blast. Really, I'm glad we got to share that. I've got one shout out. Herd Card Game, Chandler. I mean, come on. After you brought her up, I had no idea that there was even a connection, but really excited for that. I actually get to maybe host some of the sessions at the pop-up events for Herd Card Game. So,
But Mike, this episode came out after the conference. You already did that.
I know it's great. It's so much fun. The timeline's getting warped here, but no. Shout out to Herd Card Game.
Everything's so awkward.
If you're not familiar, it's a card game for service industry misfits just like yourself. Please check her card game out, and also buy the Bartender expansion and the Bartender Ramp podcast expansion, and you will have a good time. Good times will be had by all.
Yeah, there's some fantastic cards there. I love the ones that you guys did with the Bartender Rant podcast because they actually link to each of the guests that you've had on the show.
Each card is linked. It tells you which episode it's from. Like a teenage girl in a horse costume getting punched in the face. That's from an actual episode.
The one from my episode getting slapped in the face with a bar mat. Like,
yeah,
it's great. It's for a Cards Against Humanity style game. That's absolutely incredible.
Yep, and you made the right choice marrying that woman. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, it's true. Because
tell her I said that. Tell her I said that. Okay, instead of all the other negatives.
I'll tell her it after all the other stuff, and it'll feel better. She's never going to let me go to Kentucky with you again.
What about John? What about you, John? What shout outs do you have?
So I do have some shout outs. I'll give another shout out to Chandler, though. She is everywhere. I mean, how many times have we brought a guest on this show and they've had something amazing to say about what she's doing? So, Chandler, keep doing it. You're incredible. Don't stop hustling. Second shout out is for my favorite podcast. You're probably watching it. You're probably listening to it right now. It's called Bardtenders. That's right. You can check us out on all the social medias at Bardtenders. You can go to our website at www.bardtender.com. You can also slide into our DMs or shoot us an email at contact@bardtender.com. If you want to be a guest on the show, you want to collaborate, and you want to do anything fun, because we love doing cool stuff with cool people. Last but not least, shout out to Mike for this one. We love it when we get 5-star reviews. But Mike has posed a challenge to you. Give us 5 stars and leave us the worst review you could possibly imagine, and we will read it on air. That's right. We will put
it has to be 5 stars.
You
could attack our ancestors or whatever, but it has to be 5 stars.
That's right.
I'm going to get an Apple account just to do this, and I'm going to make you read it, okay?
I said I would. I'm on. I am actually here forever recorded saying that I'm going to do it, so I will commit to the bit. But we do love 5-star reviews, 5 stars only. Anything less is just absolutely unacceptable. But truly, thank you all for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being the reason that we do this show. We love you guys. Join our Discord community. It's great. We'll post links to it every so often. So hope to see all of you listeners and viewers around. Any final comments, Mike?
I don't know. Time to clock out.
I think it's time to clock out. Thank you again, Justin, for being on the show. Thanks,
guys.
Clock out. See you next time.
Good job.